And Ken Smith, I'm going to guess, has maybe made his way into Michigan. He's the editor, senior editor, in fact, of RoadsideAmerica.com, which means he probably spends a lot of time, like Willie Nelson, on the road again. Good morning.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Are you? Do you get to do a lot of traveling as the senior editor of RoadsideAmerica.com?
I certainly do. I just got back from a road trip.
You go to some interesting places, though, I'm guessing. It's not going to be the New York and the Manhattan and the Miami Beach for you. It's a real America, isn't it?
It certainly is. I certainly go to enough unusual and memorable places.
Let's start with the Grand Rapids River Monster. What is that all about? Do we have our own Loch Ness Monster in Grand Rapids?
Well, you do now. They have an art fest there every I think it's in every September they have it.
Art prize, you bet.
Art prize, yeah. And the Grand Rapids River Monster did not win for some reason. I can't understand why. But it was much beloved, and as a result, it is now a permanent fixture in Grand Rapids. They have it in a little pond there, which kind of makes it look even bigger than it already is. It's a pretty big Loch Ness. It's kind of those multi-humped things that sort of sticks up out of the water.
The life-size Loch Ness Monster that appeared briefly last year had some staying power and will stick around, I guess. This is one you're guaranteed to see if you show up. No, you go all the way to northern Scotland to Loch Ness, there's probably a pretty good chance you're not going to see anything. But if you come to Grand Rapids, we deliver, right?
That's right. That's right.
I grew up in the Downriver area looking at that world's largest tire on I-94 there in Allen Park, and there's more to that tire than meets the eye.
Well, I mean, it used to be a Ferris wheel. I mean, when it was first built, I mean, I remember riding that Ferris wheel back in the 1964-65 New York World's Fair.
Wow.
And then it was brought out to Michigan and erected next to the interstate there, and it's been there ever since. It undergoes periodic updating as tire technology improves. But it's a big. It's what, like 80 feet tall. That's 12-ton tire.
It gets a lot of attention, no question about it. A Paul Bunyan made of car parts in Alpena. I can't say that I've seen that.
Well, that's been around for a long time. That was built in the early 1960s out of old Kaisers. That's a local guy salvaged out of a junkyard. And stood outside of his repair shop for a number of years, and now they moved it to the community college there, Alpena Community College. Another example of roadside attraction that's been preserved long past its expected survival time.
I guess I should have known, since my wife is a dentist, and since we talked about the Loch Ness Monster swimming through Grand Rapids, that water in Grand Rapids, the first ever city with fluoridated water.
Yeah, and it's funny, they had a great monument there to fluoridation, and it told all about the history of fluoridation and such, but it was considered too dull, which surprised us. So they took it and they moved it into storage, and they erected this sort of abstract, sort of blue, wavy thing that doesn't really tell you anything about fluoridation. So, sometimes these monuments fall victim to politics, or they in our opinion, unwise updating.
Well, that Gerald Ford Museum, I know, is a very active working facility. And when you have a presidential museum/library, his library is actually in Ann Arbor, but the museum is right there on the river in Grand Rapids. And for the many times you drive right by it on I-96, it's so worth a stop, especially if you have children, because it's like walking through history, and you can see a life-sized replica of the Oval Office.
Well, yeah. Well, the thing we like about the Gerald Ford Presidential Museum is that he was a very sort of down-to-earth guy, and he wanted to be very honest with his museum. So he presents, all the warts of his presidency. The Nixon pardon, the disco era, all that kind of stuff is right there in his museum. So it's really kind of a refreshing take on, presidential museums can sometimes be kind of stuffy and snobby. It also has believe it or not, it also has on display the gun that was used to try to assassinate him, which is unique for a presidential museum.
Yeah.
But he's got it on display. It's one of the few things apparently in the museum that's actually armed alarmed because they just, they're very casual. They're very, very friendly, nice, down to earth sort of place.
You know what? It's odd too. In the middle of summertime, you're driving through Michigan, and maybe you're on your way to Caseville or something like that, or maybe up north, and you suddenly come across this little Bavarian village where it's Christmas all year round in Frankenmuth.
Frankenmuth, yes, Frankenmuth. It's that's kind of an odd mix for us. It's got Germans and Christmas and chicken restaurants.
Yeah.
And that the cheese house is there too, with that big mouse that you can pose next to. So it's a whole mix of stuff in Frankenmuth.
Some of these things end up being, as I'm guessing, very tasteful and memorable, and some of them are really sort of kitschy, aren't they?
Well, yeah, it's a mix of stuff. I mean, it's funny what becomes beloved. I mean, there's things like the Jackson Cascades, in Jackson with all those water fountains that spout off every night, and you can go and sort of watch them. You've got the Museum of Magic in Marshall, which is a guy named Bob Lund. Spent his entire life collecting magic memorabilia, and in fact, the story is that he ate nothing but peanut butter sandwiches in order to be able to afford to buy this stuff. So it's a great mix of eclectic and oddball and just kind of funky things that you can see all along.
When you go up through northern Michigan on your way maybe to Harbor Springs, or on your way from Harbor Springs to Mackinac Island, you come across Indian River, the Cross in the Woods, and I always find that to be a very peaceful spot.
Yeah, well, it's the world's largest crucifix. It's huge. I mean, the thing is I think it's about 80 feet tall, and it's really. And they also have a nun doll museum there, which is kind of odd. But yes, it is a very peaceful spot. And then, of course, you get back on the highway, and what's the next thing you see is that billboard for the man killer clam.
Yes.
At Seashell City. So
what happens? I live in the state and I've driven past it a million times. What's inside that Seashell City with the man-eating clam? What do you see?
No, it's not a man-eating clam. It's a man-killer clam. They're very specific about that.
Okay.
You go in there and they say the clam did not actually eat men; it just killed them. It's a giant clam, and you'd be swimming, and the thing would lock onto your feet and drown you. So they're very specific about that. It's not a man-eating clam.
How big is it?
It's say it's about as big as this is about as big as a Volkswagen, I guess.
Wow. Did that come out of the Great Lakes, I wonder? I don't know. I'm not going to go swimming anymore. I thought Jaws was bad. I didn't know it could clamp down on my foot. Because I like to wear those water shoes when I go in the lake anyway, because I don't want to step on anything, at all. But that's what about outside Michigan now? Has there been a roadside sort of thing that you saw that you said, wow, this is a little too much for me? I've never quite seen anything like this in my life.
No. At this point in my life, I think I've probably seen everything. But, well, for example, like I said, I just got back from a road trip. We were just down at the Barbed Wire Museum down in McLean, Texas. It's as you would expect, an entire museum of barbed wire. But the guy who runs it has been collecting it for about 70 years, and he's actually made it into art. He's got a barbed wire hat, which you can imagine is something you put on your head very, very, very gently.
Yeah, it sounds like it reminds me of a crown of thorns. Why would you want to wear a barbed wire hat? That's very, very unusual. Now, we'd like to make fun of Hamtramck in the Detroit area because it's a strange mix actually of traditional Polish people, and then there's a mosque there, and it's kind of in a weird spot in town. But neon kielbasa, if you're going to have a neon kielbasa in Hamtramck, you're just asking to be made fun of, aren't you?
Why? Why would that be? I mean, it's a perfect advertising replica thing you need to let people know that you've got a delicious kielbasa in there. I think it's about 30 feet tall, that kielbasa. It's been there forever. It's a beloved local landmark, and that's kind of neat. I mean, we think that's kind of nice that these old sort of advertising symbols have become something that people have embraced now. I mean, for so many years they were just sort of thrown away or turned off and put in a dump. But now, people really recognize that there's something that's kind of fun and unusual and unique and worth saving.
Michigan has a funny town by the name of Hell, which isn't too far from the state capital. And I guess they make the most of it in hell, don't they? I mean, if
Well,
you're going to have a name
yeah,
like
hell
that.
is pretty tiny, which I guess it should be reassuring.
Yeah.
And in fact,
Not
the
too
only thing
many.
that's in hell is an ice cream shop. And apparently you get your ice cream made in little coffins there, which is kind of a nice
dear.
touch as well.
Paul Bunyan shows up a few times across the state of Michigan. What's he doing here?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big one is up at what is that?
Oscoda?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's that one in Castle Rock too. Isn't there one right outside of Castle Rock? That big one.
Manistee?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah. So it's There's a number of Bunyans there. There's Michigan sort of battles with Minnesota and Wisconsin for claim of the Bunyan supremacy.
What do you think of the Pure Michigan commercials that you may have seen that have been played around the country now?
I haven't seen them.
Oh, we see. We gotta get some more Pure Michigan funding, because if the executive editor of RoadsideAmerica.com hasn't seen them, we're not getting our message out. But how does we got about 30 seconds left? But how does Michigan measure up when it comes to landmarks and oddities?
Oh, very, very well.
Oh, good.
You've got an excellent state as far as unusual tourist attractions are concerned. I mean, you've got Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum,
Yep, I've been there.
Farmington Hills.
Yeah.
You got Di Uper's Tourist Trap up in Ishpeming. I mean, come on. I mean, you got the whole UP.
And don't forget the most important oddity in all of Michigan, the state capitol, right down the street from where we are here. Thank you very much. We will read you at RoadsideAmerica.com. RoadsideAmerica.com when you're planning your next trip. Make it more fun, because getting there is the real journey, isn't it? Thank you very much. Travel safely.
Thank you, Michael.
Ken Smith. This morning, it's Michael Patrick Shields all across Michigan.